Welcome back to The Independence. 2 Australian hostages died today along with their captor after commandos stormed a cafe in Sydney following a 16-hour siege. The gunman, Monharan Monis, was an Iranian-born radical who received political asylum in Australia in 1996. Monis had previously launched a hate mail campaign against the families of fallen Australian soldiers in Afghanistan. He was charged in multiple cases of sexual assault and was a suspect in the gruesome murder of his ex-wife. Lisa Daftari joins us. She's a Fox News contributor. She's also an expert on Iran. Lisa, welcome back to The Independence.
Thank you. Good to be back.
So tell me about this guy. I've heard this phrase, lone wolf, today because, you know, obviously one of the things we've been warned about in this country with ISIS emergence is lone wolves being galvanized on their own, radicalized on social media, and then carrying out gruesome acts. But this guy was not just such a random Facebook dweller. He actually had 14,000 likes. He was known to authorities and plenty of Muslims in Australia. Tell me about him.
Right. So I always don't like the term lone wolf. I don't think it makes much sense in any of the cases that we're seeing, because regardless of whether he was 100% coordinating with ISIS or with any other jihadi groups, there was an ideology that was motivating him. And as you said, 14,000 followers on Facebook, that's more than I have, and I appear on TV pretty regularly. So, I mean, whether or not he was trying to follow someone else or whether or not he was trying to get a following, he was obviously motivated by something. And then we have all these different little pieces that this morning didn't make much sense to us. You have an Iranian, and usually Iranians are Shiite. And then you have him pledging allegiance to ISIS, a Sunni group. So to put together all the different pieces, this guy was obviously troubled. He had a psychological state that was not obviously stable, and the Iranian regime says they knew about that. They put out a message this morning saying that we tried to even warn Australia about that, allegedly. So basically you have somebody who was aligning himself with different groups, getting into trouble wherever he went. He had bad blood with the Iranian regime. He left Iran. He got religious asylum in Australia. He was living there. I saw reports this morning that I translated from Farsi that says he was aligning himself with Hezbollah for a while, and then most recently, a month ago, he aligned himself, he converted to Sunni, he says that on his website, and then aligns himself and pledges allegiance to ISIS.
Yeah. And what do you make of that switch from Shia to Sunni? How important is that? And what are some of the more aspects of this case as we try and define it early on?
Right, so these are two different sects of Islam that are actually at war right now, and that's where we see, the confusion, because we do have ISIS, and that's the, main problem that a lot of us are focusing on, but we have a larger problem, which is the Iranian regime, and we don't look at that as a major problem because the West and U.S. is spearheading that. We're trying to negotiate with this regime, right? So, you have a case here where you have so many people and so many threats globally, with the threat of extremism and jihad, and a lot of that is, we tie that back to ISIS, and a lot of that we tie that back to different groups. So whether it's the Iranian regime exporting and funding terrorism globally, or it's Al-Qaeda, or it's Hezbollah, this is an ideology, meaning you don't have to tie this back to Syria or to Iraq or to Iran. This can be somebody on their laptop in New Jersey or Oklahoma or anywhere else. And the other issue that we're seeing here is excusing a lot of this extremism or this ideologically based radicalism, excusing that with psychological issues. And then we have a large spectrum of different cases. So whether it's the Oklahoma beheading that we saw a few months back, or the man in New York with the axe, and now this case. Obviously, these people are not in a normal psychological state.
Well, and Lisa, not to interrupt you, we've only got a couple seconds left, and what really troubles me is, it's these acts of violence that, take a few lives, but they paralyze entire cities. We saw it in Canada, right. We saw it in Boston, we're seeing it in Sydney, and I think these radicalized terrorists, they realize it doesn't take a lot to have this massive police response.
Right, and that's exactly it. We don't know when it's coming, we don't know where it's coming, and we can't live this way, feeling as though we're almost surrendering to the terrorists, saying that they can take over at any point. But the truth is they are radicalizing at that speed, and they do know that they have that power over the free world and over the West. When ISIS leaders have already called for people living in the West to launch these attacks in the countries that they live in, I mean, that's the problem that we're dealing with. So
and
again,
the solution,
we don't want to call it a lone wolf because
concealed carry.
The solution is
get a gun.
No, we have
Lisa,
to be
we have to
aware.
go, and I want you to come back always. Thank you so much for taking time.
Always.
Absolutely
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Coming up.